Welcome one and all to Umami Manga. I'm one of your hosts, Petter, and with me I got my co-host, James.
How's it going?
And in today's episode, we're talking about Volume 1 of the To Your Eternity manga. We're starting this new series. The anime of this is recently started running. So I think it's still running. It's going to be 20 episodes all in all. But James and I are going to only be talking about the manga. James has never read the manga before. Well, I mean, he's read the first book for this discussion, but he's going into it blind. I have read the first 12 volumes, so I know the story up to that point, but as with our Kaguya-sama discussions, I'm taking a break there, so I will, when we get up there, I will be just as unspoiled as James, and that's when I'll continue reading the story along with the podcast as well. And also, I guess I will also give a guarantee that I will not spoil anything for any future books, obviously, throughout these discussions, even though I do know some things. So I do guarantee that. And in the discussion, we're going to be talking about the characters, similarly to as we do how we do it in the Kaguya-sama discussions. And if some other kind of discussion pop up, I guess we can add to that too. But at least at the base, we're going to be talking about the characters. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, this is the first time we're talking about this series, so I guess we'll find out what works, kind of, I think, as we go.
Before we keep going, do you mind if I ask what made you want to start reading this series for this, or doing this as a podcast?
Yeah, that's a good question. I discovered this manga, I think it was in spring last year, was when I started reading it, and it was because I was a big fan of Yoshitoki Oima's other manga called A Silent Voice, which is far more well known, largely thanks to the movie adaptation that it got in 2016. But yeah, I was curious what other things she had done, so I started reading this manga back then, last year. And I was very quickly just really brought into it, and I became a huge fan of it very quickly. Like by volume 3 and 4, I was like totally, like it had become one of my top 3 favorite manga series ever.
Nice.
And so I guess the thought was always there ever since last fall or last winter or whenever, when we started Umami Manga back in December. The thought was kind of always there in the back of my head. Obviously, we started with Kaguya-sama then to talk about that. But basically since then, I also had like sort of a long-term thought that it would be nice to talk about this one after we catch up with Kaguya-sama, which we are doing now. Mm-hmm. But it really is because I do love it so much. It's easily in my top 3 manga series ever. And also, and I think this is good for both you and I, now that Attack on Titan is over, it's nice to have another fantasy epic.
That's fair.
To have that kind of distract us for a while. So yeah, that's basically those reasons why I wanted to cover this. It is one of the most beautiful stories I have ever experienced, and also one of the most unique.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Sweet. Yes. So let's start talking about Fushi, the main character. Mm-hmm. He is immortal. His origins are a bit unknown, or a bit of a mystery. He was somehow brought to the earth as a sphere or an orb kind of thing, which, he became a rock, then he became moss, then he became a wolf, and ultimately he became a human boy. And we learned that Fushi needs some form of stimuli in order to obtain a new form like that. Mm-hmm. And I guess we might learn more about what that means as we move forward. But I just thought that was like some interesting kind of lore bits, which obviously is very basic at this point, but it's still like an interesting start, I think. And
yeah,
I've always been a sucker for like shapeshifters and stuff like that in fiction. I mean, Attack on Titan is one of those things, but obviously. But,
yeah, fair.
And obviously, it's never like the main selling point for me, but it's always something I really enjoy.
For me, Fushi is like watching a blank slate gain a character or gain like a personality. I mean, granted, I've only read 4 chapters, just the chapters that are in this volume, but it feels like that's going to be where at least part of the story goes, is you see Fushi kind of become and gain his consciousness and potentially humanity. I mean, I'm not sure how he'll identify himself. But
right.
It is interesting. You do see that growth as he learns even the most minute things of eating
Yeah.
or talking. I mean, talking is not very minute, but still, it's impressive to see
Mm.
that, or not impressive. It's interesting to see that progression take place. And one, it kind of made me think about the things I take for granted that are just common knowledge. But
Yeah.
for this object, lack of a better word,
Yeah.
it's entirely new. So it's fascinating that to get that kind of insight on it.
Really, yeah. Because in this book we see him learn things from the boy in the first chapter and from March. Those are kind of, well, the two characters that he interacts with the most in this book, and he definitely, like, it's from them he learns the things, you know, as you said, like eating,
Right.
a little bit of talking, and stuff like that. It is definitely fascinating to follow along with, I think, and to see, like, to what extent is this gonna go, you know.
Right.
It really is, as you said, a blank slate. It could go any direction, kind of.
Right. It really can. And it probably depends on the influences around him as well. But again, I don't think it'll be terribly quick. Just the way that the pacing has gone. I mean, maybe the writer will pick it up as it goes. Maybe Fushi will get quicker. But I think that it seems like it'll be somewhat of a slow process. But I could be wrong there.
I mean, I do really appreciate kind of the, at least the way it's depicted in this volume, how, like, kind of the realism kind of behind how fast he learns these things and how he reacts to these things. Like, for someone who knows nothing about the world, of course, eating should be a kind of a new weird thing. Like, it,
Yeah,
when you think
yeah.
about it, of course. So I think that's really interesting, and talking too, because I feel like in so many other fictional works, if there's like some alien or other type of like non-earthly life form that comes into our society, it's able to like start learning our language like super easily, super quickly, in a lot of different works. But here is like really, it really, like, he can't speak for this whole volume. Like, yeah, he says thank you in a weird little goofy way at the end, but
Yeah.
it's like, it's so slowly, and it's logical. I think it makes sense that this is the pace that he's learning.
Right. And even with the food, like we were saying, it felt like the pain in the stomach or whatever, but it didn't realize it had to eat in order to
Right.
fulfill that need. I guess it eventually did learn that. But anyway, it's just, yeah, it's really, really cool to see it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and something else that I thought of regarding, well, when he fights the bear, we learn that he's able to transform seemingly at will between the various forms that he has attained.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, right, for sure. And so I was wondering, so it was when he first turned into a wolf the first time that he gained consciousness. And so I wondered, or kind of, what do you think if he would transform back into like the moss or the rock, like his two first forms, like, but that don't have consciousness? What would happen then?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did think about that. What would be what would be the benefits of him
Right, yeah.
transforming into those, other than
Yeah.
maybe stealth?
Maybe. But like, I wonder, like, would he lose his consciousness and not be able to turn back? Like,
I'm not sure. That's a good question. That could potentially be point of no return if you do that. But then again, this is kind of a strange substance anyway.
oh yeah, absolutely,
So
for sure.
maybe it could still retain some sort of consciousness during that whole thing.
Maybe. Yeah, because taking into account, like, a wolf and a human obviously don't have the same mental capacities, but he doesn't seem
Right.
affected by that when he shifts back, like, back and forth between those forms, you know.
I mean, he's able to say thank you as a wolf, which is
Exactly.
probably not normal. I mean, people
Right.
think their dog is saying like thank you or mama or something like that. They're not. They're not. You're fooling yourself.
Right.
Actually, about that, while we were going through this, I forget at what point I thought this, but it may have been when he transformed into the boy. But I thought, oh, that'd be cool if he could go between forms like wolf and a boy. I think it was the next chapter when he kept dying. I thought,
Right.
oh, that'd be cool if he could transform into a wolf and go back. Nah, that's too like super powery. Like that's probably not this kind of a story. And then it happened. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have doubted myself. Uh, but I think it's a nice twist to it all,
Yeah.
and just it creates even more questions about Fushi.
Mm-hmm.
My question, probably my biggest question, is more about like the future with him.
Mm.
It's not necessarily a prediction because I don't have an answer.
Right.
What is his goal going to be? The narrator basically says, well, along the lines of he's experiencing life,
Mm.
going through that, or just
Kind of see the world.
see the
Yeah.
world kind of thing.
Mm.
But once he gains this consciousness, if he does, is he going to want to seek out his creator? Is he going to want to fulfill some sort of purpose? I mean, what's the end goal for him?
Yeah. Right. Right.
Or what's the end goal of the story?
Exactly.
Is there a point where he's like, I'm done. All right, take me back, or is it just going to be him is immortal? He goes through human society to kind of modern day ish. So I don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting in that way because yeah, definitely the story doesn't have like a distinct premise really, or like goal as you said. Like
Right.
definitely. And I think usually I don't usually I'm not super into stories like that. But I don't know, man. It's something special about this one. uh, I guess it's partially or maybe largely the mystery aspect of it. Like we don't there's so much we don't know about Fuji, and like both in regards to his past and in regards to his future. Like we don't know how he was brought to the world or where he came from. We don't know the extents of his abilities potentially.
That's true.
It's just really interesting blank slate character that I'm yeah, I love him. Or I love it, I guess. I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
the fact that he takes the form of a boy, it makes it easier to
Yeah.
say him for him. Like I think I
Right.
usually just kind of default to that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But yeah. Anyway, anything more on Fushi?
I think I'm good. The story is just starting out,
Right.
so it's hard for me to know exactly what I think of them or
Yeah.
where the story is going. But I think for the most part we've covered everything that I was thinking.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And even though Fushi is the protagonist of the story, and especially at least in this first volume, he really doesn't have that much of a character yet. He hasn't really developed a personality or anything like that, really.
Right.
So let's move on and talk about the boy with no name, and who's really only in the first chapter of this volume. His people left him with the elderly in his village in the snow to find a new, better place to live. And he's been waiting for him, or he had been waiting for them for 5 years, but he still stayed positive about it, which was, I think, very
Yeah.
admirable and very strong of him. Like alone there for 5 years, like damn, that's rough. And he dreams of seeing the world, meeting new people, feeling new things, and I think in some way that may have rubbed off on Fushi potentially. At least the fruit thing, because he mentioned sweet fruits when they were out in the snow, and
True.
he didn't know what that was, but he was so curious about it, and lo and behold, when Fushi finds that sweet fruit, he freaking loves it.
You
Yeah.
know, I don't think it stops at the fruit. I think it
No.
continues on to his will.
Mm.
I don't know how it would have translated exactly because I'm not sure if Fushi would have been able to understand the boy when he was just a wolf. But maybe some sort of connection happens when Fushi transforms into that person. I'm not sure. I mean, we do know, at least it's implied, that the boy's spirit does go on or pass on to the next life or whatever sort of afterlife they have in this. So it's not necessarily with Fushi, but maybe there was some sort of will that was passed on and to journey forward. And I think Fushi's journey in chapter 2 shows that the boy and his village's desire to leave that area and find that, lack of a better word, paradise, was nearly impossible. Or at
Right.
least it would have taken a lot longer than they expected.
For sure. And he also, or at least presumably, Fushi did travel the same direction that he and the boy had been
Yeah.
traveling, since he did reach the mountains eventually,
Hmm.
which is, I think, also another thing to support that.
It's just a sad story.
Hmm.
This boy is so positive and thinking on the bright side of things, and he's all alone. And he kind of dies alone. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a sad story, but I think it helps that he had that attitude. Kind of makes it made me feel, well, it made me feel sympathetic to him and
Mm.
his situation.
Yeah, but I do feel like the further we get into the first chapter, the like, more and more we were able to kind of see through the boy's positive facade in a way, or because I wonder if he is actually feeling as positive as he comes across, or if he just kind of has that facade to kind of hide his
Hmm.
sadness and his struggles as some kind of coping mechanism, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what it is. I don't necessarily
Mm.
think he's completely blind to
Yeah.
what's happening, but instead of complain or curse his situation, he decides to cope with thinking on the positive side, which is
Yeah.
probably very difficult. I know I would struggle with that big time.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, it's so admirable, like the attitude he has, and he is able to like keep up for that long. And like yeah, and as you said, like instead of complaining, because like there was one point when he was like sort of he wasn't complaining, but it was
Uh
like
huh.
I think if he had had another kind of mindset, it would have come across as complaining. When he was talking about, oh, I can't wait till we get to the mountains where we can eat other types of food. That was basically him complaining about the food that he had there. Although he didn't express it in that kind of way. He was able to express it in a more positive manner, sort of. And like it's because of that attitude of his. But yeah, then I think it's the point after he when he falls into the freezing water. That's kind of when it starts going downhill.
Yeah.
And although for him, like he doesn't even give up hope there. Like he, I think, gives up hope when he finds out that most of the people, or probably all of the people that left the village, had died.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, when he loses hope. Um, and when he starts crying there, damn, that was such a powerful scene, I think.
Agreed. It makes me wonder why these people were in this frozen wasteland to begin with. I guess it just got worse as time went on
Mm,
and they needed to find somewhere else. But why were they so far away from easier climate and other people?
yeah.
I wonder if there is some sort of banishment or separation that happened. But maybe this tribe just settled there and never never left, even though conditions got worse weather-wise. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine whenever those people did start living there, it was probably better conditions, I imagine. I
Mm,
mean, it must have been.
yeah.
Or unless, as you said, some kind of banishment type of thing. Although, I probably choose to believe that they settled there during a period when it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
I imagine.
So why did it get that bad? Like, is it just the nature's climate changing, or does it have something to do with like yokai spirit kind of thing? Like with we had the bear that I know is jumping way forward, but the
Mhm.
bear, Oniguma, whatever his name was,
Yeah.
that doesn't look like a natural beast. It looks like almost like a yokai.
Right. No,
So
for sure.
do some of these yokai have a ability to affect the weather or something? I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm just putting out things at this point. even though we're supposed to save the predictions.
No, I mean if it's like in the discussion, like by all means, I think it's always interesting to hear like little predictions and speculations and stuff like that. Um,
Mm.
and I do still like if it's not related to some kind of supernatural thing, I still think it makes sense because I do think that people, obviously not everyone, but I do think a lot of people kind of have, I mean, they have a connection to their home community, their town,
Hmm.
where they want to stay. They don't want to move away.
Right.
You know, a lot of people, and so I think even if climate was changing slowly from a warmer climate to a colder climate, I still think it makes sense for people to stay there. I mean, ultimately they didn't, or at least everyone except for the boy and the elderly. But yeah,
But eventually got to a point where they realized they couldn't stay there,
yeah,
so they had to leave.
mm-hmm, right,
It just makes me wonder why they thought it was. I guess they just misjudged how close the better place would have been,
yeah.
where the mountains were.
Mm-hmm. I remember the first time I read this chapter, up until the point where we saw that they had all died, like a couple of days travel away. Up until that point, I was under the assumption that they had all reached better lands where they were just living happily and just had just just ignored their the boy that they
Oof.
left back home. Like that was the assumption I was under until I got to that point, which is way crueler than it probably was. I mean, it was cruel that they all like, everyone died in the end, so it's still very cruel. But yeah, I'm sort of glad that wasn't the case at least.
Right. I mean, it's really sad, and
Mm,
that's what I got out of it is that they all died. But you do bring a
mm.
good point, or at least your previous self brought a good point that maybe could it be that some people potentially made it out somehow? Then again, there was that X on the arrow, so maybe not.
Yeah, but like I think it's definitely a possibility though,
Hmm.
because we don't know how many people left the village.
Oh, what if someone recognized him? Oh, that would be so interesting. Someone recognizes
Ooh,
him out in the real world, not the real world, but out there in society.
definitely. Yeah, yeah. Right, because right, definitely possible. Because I mean, there were a bunch of like gravestones there, so
Hmm.
it could have been everyone, but I mean, yeah, we don't know.
Maybe it's a red herring,
Right,
kind of like, to make you think it was everybody, but maybe some people did actually
right.
make it out, but at the cost of everyone else dying, which is still really sad.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Although, yeah, I still think that could be pretty interesting though. The last thing I have on the boy is that he drew all the faces of everyone in the village on the wall in his house, and
Yeah.
he did that in order to not forget about them.
Hmm.
And right before he dies, he asks Fushi to remember him forever. And I think it seems like Fushi, thanks to having his ability to take his form, he he does that. He will do that. He will remember him forever.
Yeah. Hmm.
He will carry him with him along with the wolf. Uh, in a similar way to the boy had the paintings on the wall, which I think is a nice little,
Oh, that's a good comparison.
yeah. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's very sweet.
Yeah. Anything more on the boy?
Nope.
I do think it's a little bit like a bit of a shame that the boy doesn't get a name. Like even the wolf has a name, but the boy doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. I was kind of hoping when I was rereading it that I missed the name somehow because he kept calling
Ah,
the wolf's name,
right.
and I was like, oh, maybe at one point he calls himself silly for that, but it's not very often where I use my own name when I'm addressing myself. So it's
Right. Yeah, exactly. Unless you
yeah.
talk about yourself in third person.
Yeah. I'm not some
But
anime girl trope. Come on.
right. Yeah. Very well. Moving on to March.
What a funny name.
Yeah. In Japanese, because I looked on the To Your Eternity wiki where they have like the
Uh huh.
names spelt in like Romanji as they are written in Japanese. It's Machi
Oh, Machi.
in Japanese, which maybe literally does mean March, Like, I mean, I don't mean that it means the month March. I mean
Uh huh.
like maybe that's what they call like the, for example, the Roman god of war, March. Like maybe that's what they call him in Japan.
Yeah,
Maybe.
maybe. It could be that in the translation process they asked the translators to spell it like this. That
Right.
sometimes happens.
Mm-mm. But anyway, March. The first we see of her, she's pretending to be a mother to her hungry kids, and which is super sweet, first of all. But I thought that was interesting because we know that she lives in a rather primitive and probably quite poor village, in the mountains or in the forest, or and so it makes sense that she plays those sorts of games where she lives in a place where probably a lot of people are going hungry a lot of the times. So she just kind of plays about what she knows, about what she usually sees, hungry kids.
Hmm. I didn't think about that.
I don't know if I did dug too much into that, but I that's how I kind of tried to read that. But yeah, anyway, we learned that her big dream is to grow up and become a mother. Um, but then she is chosen as an offering to the Oniguma bear, and thus she's doomed to die before she gets to grow up. So sad.
So sad. I think yeah, the whole her playing with their dolls and you know pretending to be the mom is kind of just a comparison to her potentially
Mm.
not being able to grow up. Although at the
Right.
very least she was able to make it out alive in this volume, so that's nice.
Yeah, definitely, definitely very, very nice. I thought it was also really sad, when after she ran away and she had the nightmare, um,
Oh
and
yeah.
the night which when she woke up from that nightmare, she kind of felt like she had to be the sacrifice, like, and like if she had to do it for the others, which is awful. I mean, it's an awful situation. It's noble of her, I suppose, but it's still like she should not have to be in that situation, which makes it really sad. And also seeing
Mm-hmm.
the sadness and despair of her parents was also heartbreaking.
I don't blame her parents for kind of going along with it because that's their custom, and I'm sure there would have been a lot of backlash. But at the same time, I don't know. I wish they could have done something.
Mm,
It's a hard situation to be in, like
yeah,
especially at that time in history.
for
Um,
sure.
I mean, I don't doubt this is exactly like Earth, obviously, but there's definitely some similarities to our own history.
Yeah, right, exactly. It is a fictional world, but definitely inspired by our
Uh
world.
huh.
Right.
And you mentioned that dream that March had. I mean, talk about a guilt trip, and
Right.
not just that dream, but just what people were telling her that if you run away, then we'll just grab another girl, or
Mm,
another your sister.
right.
And oh gosh, like that is just emotionally draining, I think.
Definitely.
Uh, and yeah, it's hard, especially for a little girl like her. But she has a strong will and a very bright spirit that you just love
Hmm.
to see, and just so
Yeah.
wholesome. So, you know, I'm glad that she's in her own way tried to fight back or run away and did give in, but also you could tell she had that conflict within her of
Mm,
trying to decide what the right way was. But anyway,
yeah.
it's really cool to see.
Definitely. And like speaking of kind of that conflict, or well, she has well, I think she has two major conflicts, or sort of like, well, one is directly conflict, is what you were talking about, like how to behave or how to react to this, how to like what to do, like to go along with it for the sake of the others or to try to escape to save myself, like that conflict. And also kind of her struggle, or well, her dream really, but it becomes a struggle because of her potential death, of becoming a grown up. She wants to become a grown up, but she won't be able to do that if she's going to die as a kid. And
Hmm.
so one of the first thing that she does after she runs away from Hayase is that she washes the ink off her face, that marks her as a child in her culture, which I thought was an interesting little kind of just, I guess, symbolizing her trying to be more of an adult, kind of, which her dad try to tell her to be more like to act more like an adult and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And she is the one to give Fushi his name after the Japanese word for immortal.
Oh yeah.
Fushimi. I think at
Mm-hmm.
least I don't know if you get those pages also on Crunchyroll, like little extra pages with little information and stuff.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, because if it wasn't for that extra page in the volume, like in the physical book that I got, I wouldn't know Fushimi is the word for immortal. So,
Yeah.
but you probably knew that already.
Yeah. I mean,
uh,
there's a few words for immortal, but.
right. But I guess that's one of them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's nice. It really is like the way that a kid would name someone, which I think is sweet.
Yeah.
And as we said earlier, she starts teaching him just how to speak a little bit, and she teaches him manners as well, or at least to a degree. With the hold the fruits in your hand when you eat them, like, and in a sense, with that in mind, she does in a way become a mother to him, which I think is pretty beautiful.
Yeah. That's it. She's the best mom, right? Best mom.
Right? Yeah, easily. I think I retweeted something for Mother's Day recently on with March in it. Like, so yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I hope in the future that she's able to escape any sort of sacrifice thing or any sort of that
Mm,
garbage, especially with the bear dead now supposedly. Like it that should be a thing of the past, right? Although it does seem like either way they can't go back to their home,
yeah.
or at least March can't go back to her home. So I don't know because if the bear was dead and that solved the problem, then she should just be able to go back and say, guys, there's no need for the sacrifices anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
But the fact that she can't might mean there's more to it than just
Mm,
pleasing some bear god.
right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, man.
Clearly, there's more to it, but I just hope that nothing happens to March or what's her name, Parona.
Yeah, definitely. So I do you want to move on to Perona now?
Sure, she's very cute. I like Parona.
Yeah, I love her. She's awesome. She's so sweet with March too. Like,
Yeah.
man, like she makes her plushies and plays with her and like,
Mm-hmm.
so sweet. And she practices archery. She's not that good at it, but hey, she's got like the support of the whole village, which it was awesome to
Yeah.
see. Like everyone's like rooting for her.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, her sisterly bond with March is very wholesome,
Mhm.
and it makes me wonder why she's grown so attached to March, other than the fact that March is just an adorable cinnamon bun.
Right.
I think it's well, I wonder if it has something to do with her own family because we don't really see Perona's family. At least I
Right.
don't recall.
Yeah.
So I wonder if she's either lost her family, maybe she had a sister that was sacrificed, maybe she's just, separated from her family, maybe she's not even from the village. I don't know.
Mm, mm.
I just find it interesting that she has this desire to be close to March.
Yeah.
But I guess, who can blame her? She's adorable.
Yeah. Right. But no, I do think you bring up some interesting points there, especially since we don't know anything about her family situation and her kind of past, really.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think there could be some interesting stuff there potentially. And it was also really cool to see like how even before the ritual, like even before Hayase and her people came to the village, Perona knew what was going to happen, so she tried to
True.
lead March away and try to protect her even from the beginning,
Yeah.
which obviously didn't go any like go anywhere.
Ah, yeah.
But then she did try to she came to her rescue again when they were taking March away, which even though she didn't like directly rescue her necessarily there,
Hmm.
if she hadn't intervened, I don't think any of that would have happened. March wouldn't have been able to run away at all in the first because it was that
Hmm.
distraction that allowed March to run away and meet Fushi.
And also, she wouldn't have been able to lead Fushi to the bear in order to fight it. So, yeah, I think even if Parona had got there, if Fushi wasn't there to begin with, then
Hmm.
it wouldn't have worked out. So, Yeah, her whole thing was definitely important, and I love how her ability to escape the way she did was really clever. So she
Yeah.
has resourcefulness that I really like, and
Hmm.
she just got an incredibly strong will, or at least a strong mindset, and I appreciate that in a character.
Absolutely. I feel like all of these characters, Parona, March, and the boy, all have that really strong will. And,
That's fair.
we know the boy and March have very distinct dreams.
Yeah,
March with her becoming an adult and a mother, and the boy with wanting to see the world, experience new things. And, like, I love how Yoshitoki Oima really makes us care about these characters in such a strong way through their dreams, kind of. Obviously, we don't know, as we said earlier, we don't know as much about Perona as we know about the boy and March, at least through this volume. But it would be interesting to kind of get that same depth for Perona as well, because she is very lovable, I think, as a character.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I expect we will. I mean,
Hmm.
I think it'd be a waste of potential if we don't
Right,
get more depth into her.
definitely. Anything more on her?
Nope.
All right, then let's move on to Hayase, the sort of villain.
Yeah. Well, she seems like a character that will get a change of heart eventually, or will join quote unquote their side. Kind
Hmm.
of a. Uh, Vegeta's not a good example, but Vegeta's like the big one you always think of, like
Right.
villain turned good guy.
Uh-huh.
But it's not that, because it's not so much she's a villain; she's just an antagonist at this point.
Mm.
But I think that eventually unless I'm just reading the cards wrong, she will be more on. It'd be more of a protagonist.
That would be cool.
What I like about, or what's interesting about Hayase, and even uh, compared to March Village and her people, Hayase is definitely Japanese inspired. Even her name
Hmm.
sounds Japanese,
Yeah.
whereas March doesn't. March, her village, while there is a bit, maybe some bit of some ancient Japanese culture there, it reminds me a bit of some of the native Japanese people, like the Ainus, who
Ah,
live
yeah.
live up in Hokkaido. So they kind of have that vibe going on, even though they're in a warmer
Mm.
climate this time around.
Right.
So it's that comparison between the Japanese people who came from the Asian continent over to Japan, and then the native Japanese, or the native, well, yeah, native Japanese, the native people there, that sort of interaction. Maybe there's a symbolism or a mirror to that potentially, or that's just the inspiration she got for these people. I don't know. Either way, pretty neat.
Yeah, yeah. And she does invite them to, well, invite is maybe the the wrong word. She forces them to come with her to Yanome, right? At the end of the volume. She says that if they want to live, they should come with them to Yanome.
Yep.
So yes. That seems to be where they're headed next. So it's going to be really interesting to see what that area or
Yeah.
what that country is like.
I'm definitely excited to see if it's just another part of the world that just acts differently, or if there's some sort of corruption there. I mean, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
Um,
Because we don't know who Hayase works for exactly. We know that
right.
she was put in charge of making sure the ritual goes through properly. But
Hmm.
we don't know who put her on that job. So yeah, I guess maybe we'll find out something like that.
Yeah, it's. I think she's one of the bigger mysteries,
Hmm.
right? At least to the imminent story.
Yeah, and she seems to take some kind of interest. I mean, definitely, she seems very interested in Fushi. So I guess we'll see where that leads as well, potentially.
She says something about the works of the gods, right?
Yeah. I think so.
So, at the very least, the people who live in Yanome are very superstitious, potentially,
Well, I think.
or or maybe
Hmm.
religious.
Well,
Take another word.
definitely, I'm sure they are, but I think the people in March's village are possibly even more religious because it's also implied that the people from Yanome don't actually believe in the Onoguma god or
That's true.
creature bear.
The scrub guys were saying that, weren't they, or something?
Yeah, exactly. So it's only something, or seemingly, at least the way I interpreted it, it seems to just be something they use on these more primitive villages in the mountains to kind of assert their dominance, kind of.
Control
Yeah,
them.
right. To control them.
Hmm.
Turns out there was some kind of a monster bear like that after all, but
So yeah, maybe they're not as superstitious as I thought.
I don't know.
Then again, but she does mention that whole the work of the gods. So
I mean, to have gods, I think, especially in this time age, kind of,
oh no,
it
yeah,
it makes a lot of sense for
it
anyone.
makes total sense. Yeah. Hmm.
The last thing I have on Hayase was, I guess, a sweet moment. Well, at least as far as it goes with sweetness from her, was when March was being carried up the mountain in like the carry thing, right before she ran away.
Hmm.
Hayase seemingly is trying to kind of comfort March by telling her about the freedom and kind of the paradise that comes after death, which I guess is also a religious kind of mindset. Speaking of that, but
Hmm.
yeah, I thought it was interesting to see the character who is kind of painted as the antagonist or the villain to be kind of sweet with the girl that she's about to kill. Uh, so yeah,
I think I remember reading that and thinking or wondering how much she herself believed that.
true.
Um,
Hmm.
was she just saying that to make her feel better, or did she actually believe that herself?
Or did she just say it in hopes of making March calmer, to make the job easier for her? Maybe.
But yeah, I mean that could be a possibility as well.
Obviously, the first volume, there's a lot of new characters, and we don't, obviously there's much more to learn about them. Uh, do you have anything more on Hayase?
Not on Hayase, no.
All right, then I only have one more character noted down here, and it's the narrator,
Hmm.
aka the presumed creator of Fushi.
And maybe the universe? Maybe?
Dude, yeah, maybe. We don't
I don't
know.
know.
It's possible.
Why did they send Fushi into the world? What
Exactly.
was it just I mean, why did they if they're the creator of the universe, why did they do that? Like I guess how are we supposed to understand the mindset of this omniscient being? I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really interesting.
We literally see its hand.
Hmm.
I wonder if the narrator will play any sort of role going forward. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, obviously, I guess there isn't much to say. I mostly just wanted to point him out. It's really just a voice and a hand at this point.
Hmm.
Do you have any other characters that you would like to discuss?
No, that's all I got.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There weren't many others. I mean, there was the woman who, like the old woman with the nose hair,
Oh
who
yeah,
like like
she's probably from the what is it, Yonome or whatever it's called.
Yanome. Yeah, it's called Yanome. Maybe.
Well, at first I thought it was a woman, and then you had the whole close up of her face. I was like, wait, is this a guy? But it is a woman, right?
Yeah, it's an old lady.
Okay, okay.
I guess other than the others we talked about, she might be the most prominent, even though she was really not very prominent. Um, so I guess we got through the main discussion. Do you have any other predictions? I mean, I understand if you don't. There isn't too much to go on yet, and you kind of
Right,
shared
there really
some
isn't.
things already.
And I've sprinkled some stuff. I'll just say that I think we'll get the Yanome, and we'll see more of Hayase's backstory. That'll be
Mm,
the bulk of volume 2, I think.
nice. I'm super excited to get there. And well, I actually I'm also curious to know kind of what you thought of this first volume of this manga, kind of just in general.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and especially talking again, I am excited to go into the next volume. It was interesting going through this volume kind of aimlessly without much of a goal in mind, because usually when you read a story, you know what's the intention by the first chapter for the most part. It isn't very mysterious. I mean, even in mysteries, you understand what the mystery is.
Yeah.
In this one, you're still kind of wondering what is the point or the plot that's being showed here, and then you
Mm.
get March and her village and the that story, and so then you finally get some sort of goal in mind. Okay, we gotta save March.
Right.
So
True.
that kind of gives some stability to it. I think what I can say is that I'm genuinely curious on where this story ends up.
Nice. Yeah. And as am I still. Like it's such an interesting story. Like it really is probably the most unique story that I've ever kind of come across. Just because of how well sort of the things you described is like it doesn't have like this clear kind of objective or whatever and I think also as we get further in you'll also see even more what I mean, but I think even now I think you can understand that. I also and one other thing I wanted to point out also is that as far as first chapters go across various novels, mangas, whatever, this like the first chapter of To Your Eternity is probably the strongest chapter one that I've ever read.
Hmm.
At least personally, I think it's such a perfect first chapter that just really kind of shows you kind of the tone of the manga going forward in a way, and like and while it doesn't introduce like characters to a big extent, obviously it does introduce the main character, and it well yeah it just sets up kind of the vibes kind of
Mm-hmm.
in such a powerful way.
Yeah, I agree. It's an impactful way to start the story. Forgive me for comparing, but
Uh-huh.
I do think that if the chapter one of Attack on Titan is probably one of the better um, introductions into a story that's kind of resonates with the reader for a long time. But I
Uh-huh.
think this one does a great job in that as well because, like we were saying, it's emotionally impactful,
Mm.
and the reader is still kind of wondering what in the world is this thing, and
Right.
the
Yeah.
story in general, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But I mean, of course, I agree as well. Attack on Titan has a fantastic start as well.
Yeah. Well, let me just say another comparison. The
Hmm?
art in this is so much better.
Oh, compared to early Attack on Titan,
Compared,
yeah.
comparatively. I mean, just because I compared one way, I'll compare it the other way.
Yes.
That makes it fair, right?
Yeah.
No offense, Isayama,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah. No.
the art in this is fantastic.
Oh yes.
You know, the environments and the shots are all beautifully done.
Mm,
Um, I can't wait to
really.
see this animated. To be honest, I think it'll be a beautiful ride.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The anime has done such a fantastic job so far at adapting this. Like not only with like the animations and like just the kind of like purely the quality of it is fantastic, but also like the voice acting, like the performances there, and the pacing is also perfect. Like they don't go too fast or too slow. Like it's everything I would could have dreamed of for an anime adaptation of this, and I'm so happy, and I think you'll love it too once you get to it.
Great.
I guess that's it for this discussion of the first volume.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, so if you enjoy this content, you can follow us on Twitter at Umami Manga. If you like this episode, please share it around with anyone you think might enjoy it too. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time when we'll talk about Volume 2. Bye bye.
See you later.
Haha,
Dang.
the shortest episode we ever did.
Yeah.